Tonight's presidential debate is a bit like a final exam where you get the questions in advance. Moderator Bob Schieffer has outlined 5 topics he'll focus on tonight. It's all foreign policy, and we've assembled Post reporters covering each of the topics, both here in the studio and at our bureaus in China, Pakistan, and Egypt. Here are the topics, as Schieffer announced them: our longest war, Afghanistan and Pakistan; red lines, Israel and Iran; the changing Middle East and the new face of terrorism; the rise of China and tomorrow's world; and America's role in the world. The section on the changing Middle East will get twice as much time as the other topics, and it's on the front page again today. So let's start there with David Ignatius and Anne Gearan. Good to have you both here.
Good to be here.
Obviously, coming out of the last debate, the issue of what exactly happened in Benghazi, Libya, whether it was a planned attack or a spontaneous protest, will come up again for sure. And David, you had something on this over the weekend.
Over the weekend, I got a hold of talking points that the CIA had prepared and had given to the administration, given to the White House on the Saturday, September 15, before our UN ambassador, Susan Rice, appeared on every TV talk show and was widely attacked for having said that this was a spontaneous protest and likening what happened in Benghazi to what had happened in Cairo earlier that night. And it turns out, if you read this CIA document, that it refers to their initial intelligence assessment as being that this was a spontaneous protest. So I think in the light of additional information, intelligence analysis, that view that it was spontaneous probably would be amended. But it is true that Susan Rice was pretty much reading from the talking points. And in that sense, it'll be harder, I think, for Mitt Romney to attack President Obama and his UN ambassador for that statement.
It backs up why the administration took so long.
Well, it explains that, I mean, the intelligence may have been bad, but they were going off the intelligence.
And Syria and the widening conflict there, again on the front page, and will be certainly a topic tonight. Is anything changing in the U.S. calculus of what we do vis-a-vis Syria?
Well, not immediately. The Obama administration's view has been for a very long time that getting more deeply involved in what's the internal conflict in Syria would do more harm than good. Everyone is waiting to see whether that calculus changes after the election and whether the pressure from U.S. allies, including Turkey, to get more involved in some form, be it through some kind of protected zone, which would involve U.S. assets, or through arming the rebels directly or by proxy, whether that would happen after the election, depending on who wins and depending on whether, if the Obama administration wins, whether they change their view.
David?
From what I hear from within the administration, if Obama should win the election, I think it's very likely that there'll be some additional steps taken to support the Syrian resistance. There is a recognition, which I think is correct, that left to its current course, this will have a bad outcome in terms of U.S. interests. If Mitt Romney should win, Romney has said directly that he will arm the rebels. So I think either way, there's likely to be somewhat more action.
So there's a lot to get to. Israel, Iran. Israel famously drew that red line at the UN a few weeks ago, saying you cannot go any further in your nuclear ambitions, Iran. Do we expect either Obama or Romney to indicate they would follow Israel?
You want to take that one?
Well, I think in light of the New York Times scoop, partially contradicted by the White House over the weekend,
that they're
in which they said that, well, what the New York Times said in its later editions after this White House statement was that there was an agreement in principle between the U.S. and Iran to have negotiations, one-on-one direct negotiations about the nuclear issue after the election. And as I boil it down, what that means is no formal agreement, but it's understood that they are going to sit down and try to resolve this. And I would think tonight, for people getting ready to watch this debate, look for Obama not to back away from that. I think his reading of the country's mood is that Americans don't want to get into another war in the Middle East. So the president is likely to say, yeah, if I have a chance to negotiate a peaceful settlement of this crisis so that we don't have to go to war to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, I'm going to take that opportunity up. And it'll put Romney in an awkward position of having to say, well, no, I wouldn't talk to them. And I think that's the feeling of the Obama camp is they kind of got him in a corner in this. He's not going to want to say he doesn't want to negotiate.
But you know what Romney will say to that, which is that he will back Israel to the hilt. And if that means that Israel thinks that direct negotiation calculations are purely a ploy under which the Iranians would continue to by the Israeli calculations, seek nuclear weapons, that could potentially put Obama on the back foot. That it's kind of who's Israel's better friend.
Okay, guys, sit tight for just a second as we take a tour of some of our bureaus.
Our colleagues.
Okay, Abigail Hauslohner is in Cairo, Egypt. Good to join up with you as well.
My pleasure.
So one of the main topics here is going to be the changing face of the Middle East and terrorism. And I wonder if you could kind of, in a broad sense, tell us where we are in that part of North Africa in the Middle East. Where do things stand and what are the dangers we should be worried about?
Well, what you have in the Middle East almost 2 years now after the Arab Spring started are sort of these three factors, these three trends that together combine to form this very, I think, dangerous equation that U.S. policymakers are concerned about. And that is, on the one hand, you have much lower security, poor security from Egypt to Libya to Tunisia. You also have the proliferation of weapons. You have these sort of looted arsenals of Muammar Gaddafi. Some of those ones have gone into Egypt. They've reached militants in the Sinai Peninsula. And then you also have, in the region, you have this rising religiosity. And so when you have people with extreme ideologies, and you have a lot of weapons flowing around, and you have a security vacuum, these three things, I think, make a lot of people nervous, both in governments in this region and also in the United States.
Okay, Abigail, thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Richard Leiby now joins us from Pakistan. Good to have you on board as well.
Thank you.
So a lot of the focus has turned in the last few weeks to these other parts of the Middle East we've been discussing, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, a little bit on the back burner. What should people be thinking about?
The main concern for both sides of the border is what happens after the United States pulls out. And the best thinking is that it's going to be a disaster, in that although Kabul may hold, the rest of the country will fall apart.
And on the Pakistani side, how are things holding together?
Pakistan is, I suppose, through no great competence on behalf of the civilian government, actually moving the needle toward democracy, or more toward democracy.
I've sometimes spent time overseas and looked at the American media or what American politicians are saying and kind of said, BS. If you were here on the ground, you would have a totally different understanding or describe this in an entirely different way. I wonder if there's anything from where you sit there in Islamabad where you look back at America's perception of what's happening and say, hold on a minute, that's wrong.
I spent some time in Afghanistan just a few weeks ago, and I picked up the overwhelming stench of doom. Although you hear very strong and positive assessments from the commanders and the generals, mainly the top, from the top, I think that our reporting has, that is to say my colleagues' reporting, has shown that there are great and grave issues with the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police forces. And some people say we've for sorry, $500 billion, we've trained the best enemy money can buy.
Sobering stuff. Richard, thanks.
You're welcome.
We're going to turn to Keith Richburg now in China, kind of the one non-Middle East part of the foreign policy debate we anticipate. Keith, good to join up with you in Beijing.
It's good to be here.
What is the Chinese perspective on all of this? Are they watching it closely?
Much more so than in 2008, and that's a function of a lot of different things. Mainly the fact that the internet here is a lot more sophisticated than it was 4 years ago. They've got now a lot of these microblogging sites like Twitter, Chinese version of Twitter. I mean, the Chinese are going to have their own leadership transition going on here just a week after the U.S. election. They're amazed and they're awed that the American president must stand up and answer questions from voters at a town hall. And Chinese have been making comments on Weibo saying, when are we ever going to be able to see a system like that? And can you imagine our leaders standing up and having to debate and answer questions? And secondly, there's been a little bit of trepidation going on because people hear this China bashing tone, as they call it, this anti-China rhetoric more from Mitt Romney, but also from the Democratic side, from President Obama. They're talking about being tough on trade on China. They're talking about outsourcing of jobs. They're talking about China stealing our jobs, stealing American technology. Mitt Romney said he'd labeled China a currency manipulator from day one. So that's gotten a lot of people saying, wait a minute, hold on a second. We don't want to be the boogeyman in a U.S. election. For example, this was from Global Times, which is a Communist Party-owned newspaper. I don't know if you could see that, but it shows a picture of Mitt Romney and Barack Obama as boxers. And they're punching it out there, but they're missing each other. And they're hitting a panda bear in the middle there. The headline on it is missing their target. And also the foreign ministry spokesman came out and said he hopes both candidates can tone it down and realize that good relations with China are in the interest of the United States.
Keith, thanks a lot.
Okay, take care.
Okay, back at the table with David Ignatius and Anne Gearan. The last topic is going to be America's role in the world, and this is something you wrote about today.
I would love to see tonight a real debate between these two candidates about what is America's proper role in the world, and should American power be resized to fit the way the world is changing. And I'd commend to viewers an article that was written in the Washington Quarterly in the current issue. You can click on it if you go to my article online. But it explains the reasons why there's an imbalance between American commitments and our ability to deliver on them. And one suspects that Barack Obama believes that he'd like to kind of trim back the commitments. He didn't say so. Romney's the other way. Romney really speaks the traditional language of power. And I'm going to be watching tonight to see if he hits those same notes and then how he's going to pay for it.
Okay. Thanks a lot to both of you. It'll be interesting to watch tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.